Hi, welcome to our channel, The Prairie Dog and the Raven. My name is Andrea, and this is Knit Notes Episode 5, where we're going to talk about the Framework Bralette by Jessie Maed Designs. If this is your first time watching one of the Knit Notes videos, thank you so much for clicking on the link and joining me here. And if you have seen one before, thanks for coming back, and hopefully this one will be helpful as well to anybody that watches it. If you are planning on making the framework bralette, if you have made it before, maybe you had issues with it, or if you have no idea what pattern this is and you're like, okay, maybe I would like to know more about it and maybe make it in the future, I will have timestamps in the description box below if you don't want to know, if you already know kind of what the pattern is and you just want to see my experience knitting it, all that type of thing, you can find those below. In these Knit Notes videos, basically, I take my knitting journal and go through it after I give you some information about the pattern itself, price, and all those kinds of things, and then basically go over process, modifications, anything like that that I did while I was making the pattern, and that way you can see if it's something maybe you would like to knit for yourself. So without further ado, we will go ahead and talk about the Framework Bralette by Jessie Maed Designs. So this pattern was released in September of 2019, and it is $9 US. And right now it has over 2,500 projects in Ravelry. So it's pretty popular. So you may have seen it before. I'm not sure. I'm a new knitter, so it's one that I hadn't seen until I searched through Ravelry quite a bit, just because most of the patterns I see now on YouTube or Instagram or anything like that are brand new patterns. And since this one is from 2019, it's just something that didn't really show up in my feed. But it does come in 10 different sizes. It's very size inclusive, from not uses bust circumference, but accommodates bust circumference from 24 to 68 inches, which is equivalent to about 60 to 172 centimeters. The suggested yarn is a DK weight yarn, and they use Sweet Sparrow Yarn's Goldfinch, which is 100% superwash merino. So anything like that should be okay whenever or if you choose to knit this pattern. The gauge you want to be aiming for is 20 stitches by 30 rows, and that's going to be in 4 inches or 10 centimeters of stockinette. There's also a gauge once you purchase the pattern in the ribbing, if that's something you wanted to make a gauge swatch of also. I didn't make a gauge swatch for either of them. I'm a bad knitter, but that is available. If you want to do the gauge in the stockinette and the ribbing, you can do that. The recommended needle size for the ribbing is a US 3, which is a 3.25 millimeter, and the recommended needle size for the body is a US 4, so that is 3.5 millimeter. Obviously, whatever gauge you can get with the needle that you choose or you need to use is what you want to do anyway. Some of the techniques that the pattern uses is knitting in the round, decreasing, putting stitches on hold, double knit I-cord, centered single decrease. You have a choice to use Kitchener stitch or 3 needle bind off to do kind of your finishing things. So there's quite a few different techniques that you can use, and it's a really cool pattern because it uses a lot of texture, which is kind of knit stitches, purl stitches, slip stitches, all kinds of things like that. So it's a really nice design that looks kind of like a standard bralette, which is really, really cool. The reasons that I kind of chose this pattern to knit was back in April, Sewrella was doing a mini collection of some of the greatest hits, and one of the colors in the collection was Sleeping Beauty's Castle from her Disneyland collection. I instantly fell in love with that color as soon as I saw it on Instagram, and I knew that I wanted to knit something like that. At that time, I was still a very inexperienced knitter, so I was looking through beginner patterns and something that could use possibly one skein of yarn. And I came across this Framework bralette, and bralettes are kind of my favorite upper torso management system. So it was something I really wanted to try to make, and it had so many projects of people making it. It was very size inclusive, so it had tons and tons of different people in the photos. So it was something that seemed like a really good idea that I could make and hopefully out of one skein of yarn. And so that's how I chose that I wanted the classic decay and that kind of thing. So it also has a lot of the criteria I kind of look for whenever I make or choose a new pattern to make. There are new techniques in it that I had not previously done, so that checked a box. And I also love trying patterns from designers that I've never made anything from before. And Jessie Maed Designs is one that I had not tried yet. I see her patterns all of the time, and I've always wanted to make one. There's still a few other ones that I would like to make in the future, but this is the one that I chose first to make from her selection of patterns. And so far, I'm very happy with that first selection that I did make from her patterns. Now we're going to get into my process, how I did everything and how it worked out for me and that kind of thing. So the first thing I will do is show you my framework bralette. And I am really, really happy with the way it came out. Obviously, there's going to be a couple things that I don't necessarily like, or I could have done better, being what I would still consider a beginner knitter who doesn't know a lot of techniques. And definitely there are a few in this that I had not done before. So now I'm going to kind of look at my notes here. So if you see me looking down a little bit, that's what I'm going to be reading. So to get some of the stats and stuff from my particular version of this pattern. So like I cast it on July 26th, 2026 and finished it August 1st of 2026. And like I mentioned before, I did not make a gauge swatch. It's a very small pattern to make. And so reading over some of there's a big spreadsheet in her pattern listing, and it gives a lot of the information that the test knitters used, and all of their feedback and that type of thing. And the amount of yarn each of the knitters used in the different categories of sizes was very widespread. Like, even if everybody made size small, or if everybody made size medium or extra large or 2X, whatever they made, it was a big kind of gap in how much yarn each person used. And I don't know if it was everybody chose to, if they did or didn't knit a gauge swatch, if they did or didn't make the ribbing longer or the body longer or the cup apexes longer, I don't know. So there was a big variation of that thing in the spreadsheet for the test knitters. And so I only had one skein of yarn, so I chose not to make a gauge swatch. And for once, it didn't really matter. We'll see later if it mattered. But the pattern gauge itself is, like I said, 20 stitches by 30 rows, and my gauge ended up being 21 stitches by 33 rows. So it turned out a little smaller than probably it should be, but I'm not really mad about it right now. I ended up knitting a size 3. Measurement wise, I fell 1 inch in between size 3 and 4, so small and medium. And after reading over that spreadsheet, I did choose to knit a small because a lot of the testers that knit the medium size said that they would knit a small if they knit it again. And I also generally, if I'm using superwash merino, I will size down anyway, just because I know how much it stretches. At least in my experience. I know some people don't have that experience, but the times that I have used superwash merino, which is still very few because I've only made a few garments out of it, but the very first one stretched a lot. And so I tend to kind of go down a size for that in that reason. I just went ahead and used the suggested needle size. So the US 3 for the ribbing and the US 4 for the body and the straps. So I didn't change anything there. And I used Sewrella yarn Classic DK, which is 100% superwash merino in the colorway Sleeping Beauty's Castle, and from the Disneyland collection. And it was a 100-gram skein, and so that's what I used. And after making the top, and I made a little scrunchie because I had some extra, this is how much yarn I have left from that. So I'm quite pleased with my yarn management in this instance. It took me 80 grams to make the top without a gauge swatch in the size small. And so that's equivalent to 184.8 yards or 169 meters. So I was very happy because I'm like a scrunchie addict. If you've watched a few episodes of this or know me at all, if you've seen my Instagram, every time I have extra yarn, I always want to make a scrunchie out of it. And so I tend to do that to use up the yarn that I have. And so this was no different. And I had 20 grams left. And so I made a scrunchie and have this little tiny bit to go with it. So the finished garment measurements for me, because like I said, my gauge was smaller than the gauge of the pattern. The finished garment intended measurement for the size small was supposed to be 28 inches, and mine ended up being 25 inches unstretched. So with that in mind, I ended up with 15 inches of negative ease, which sounds crazy to me because I think the pattern recommends anywhere from like -5 to 13 inches, depending on which size you knit. However, I'm not mad about it. And I've got some video and photos and stuff that I'll put in throughout the video where you can see the fit of it. I probably could have knit the medium or changed needle size to make it a little bit better. However, it's not tight at all. And I feel like the merino will stretch because it seems like it's property to do that. That superwash merino wants to stretch. And so I'm really happy with the way that it came out. The everything else was pretty much how the pattern was written. It gives you a lot of ways that you can customize it. You can make the band longer. You can make the body of it longer. It gives you, you know, ways to measure the apex of your bust so you can fix or make it very suited to yourself. And so I ended up doing the band ribbing 2¼ inches. And that is in the pattern. Like the recommended inches to do are in the pattern. I actually measured a bralette that I had to measure the amount of ribbing that it had and chose based on that, or not ribbing, the band that I had, the under breast area. And the body I used based on my own apex measurement, and so mine ended up being knit to 4¼ inches. And then the straps I knitted to 4½ inches per strap. And so that, I believe, 4½ inch straps is kind of what the pattern is supposed to be. In my process, I'll talk about, how I think those measurements ended up, but that's basically how mine kind of ended up. And I knit this 2 pattern. It starts at the ribbing at the bottom of the band, and then you go upwards and the body, and then you knit the triangles individually with their strap. And then at the very end, you come back and you put the straps together and then weave in your ends and block it, and you're all done. So it's really, really quick to knit up. And that was one of the things that I liked about it the most. After doing a fingering weight project, this was just like, oh, I made a nice bralette really quickly. And so I was super excited about it. It was a really quick win and made me kind of excited to, get into my next project. And it's also something that I would absolutely make again. And that's fantastic because that's one of the highest praise that I think I see for patterns is, would you make it again? And is it like a one-off? Is it something you wouldn't want to do again? And this one is absolutely one that I will make again in the future. Anytime I find a DK weight skein of hand-dyed yarn or something like that I really love, and I can't, I don't have a project in mind when I see it, that will probably be my go-to as far as what I would knit with that skein of DK weight yarn, for just another option of color of bralette to have kind of in my wardrobe. So, new to me techniques that were in this pattern. CSD, the centered single decrease, was something that I had not done before. So there I'm an English style knitter, so if you are continental and you want to see it done a little bit differently or anything like that, you might have to find your own video. But I use the centered single decrease knitting tutorial by Shayna Billow on YouTube, and I have a playlist on the channel where I link a lot of tutorials that I used while I'm learning to knit. And anytime I learn a new technique, I put that in there just in case it comes up again. I remember what I used to be able to go back and reference that. So if it's a technique you don't know and you want to see the video that I did, you can check that playlist and it'll be in there. Another technique from this pattern that I had never done before was double knitting I-cord for the straps. And its tutorial is linked by Jessie Maed in her Ravelry page, and it is on her Instagram specifically. So she shows how to do the double knit I-cord. And I get why people love double knit because it is so nice. It looks so great. And it's just a really, really nice finish. And so it's something that when I hear people knit cardigans or something, they're saying, oh, I want to knit a double knit button band or something for my cardigan. I get it now. I had never done it before. And so I can absolutely 100% see why people love double knitting because of how clean and professional and really nice it looks once you actually finish it. The last thing that I didn't know was Kitchener stitch. I've heard of Kitchener stitch, but I've never done it in a project. And so there was a linked Kitchener stitch tutorial also on her Ravelry page for this pattern. I think it's called How to Kitchener Stitch by Webb's Yarn. I think that's what that one is. And the other alternative you have to bind the straps together is the 3-needle bind off. And I hadn't done that one yet, but I did not have an extra needle handy at the moment, so I just went ahead and did the Kitchener. And I don't know how much of a difference that makes, whether you do Kitchener or 3-needle bind off, but that's also something that I think I'll find out more as I knit more patterns. So one of the first thoughts or issues that I had while knitting this pattern is I always assume that it is my fault, not the designer or the pattern's fault, because I am a beginner and I'm the one choosing the tutorial videos that I watch most of the time and all of that kind of thing. So I had 0 issues with the entire pattern until the very end when I was grafting those straps together. And I chose Kitchener. And I don't know if 3-needle bind off would have been better. But also the Kitchener tutorial that was linked was in like stockinette. And so double knit I-cord, is it stockinette or is it not? Because it's a knit stitch and then a slipped stitch. So I'm not sure how that works, if it should look the same in Kitchener or if it shouldn't, if I just don't have the experience with Kitchener or 3-needle bind off to know if it could have just been my tension. I'm not sure. So basically, this is what it looks like on one side. And then on the other side, it looks like this. And I'm not sure how it's actually supposed to look. And I didn't really see anybody mention how it looks whenever they're doing or in any of the Ravelry notes and that kind of thing. So I think it's 100% completely a me issue. And if anybody knows the answer to that, if Kitchener and 3-needle bind off are the preferred way, or if you have to do it a little bit differently, since it's double knit, if there's like a small kind of technique difference, or it's literally I will just get better at it with practice. And if so, that is perfectly fine. That's not something anybody will ever see. Like I think I had the same kind of issue with the way my Wisteria tank straps looked like when they were put together. However, I don't think that it's a big deal. It's just something I noticed, which is why I'm mentioning it. It could be perfectionism. I don't know what it is. But so that was something I did want to mention because it's something that I don't know. I don't have enough experience with. And so I'm hoping that as I learn more and get better, with knitting, it's something that I will figure out. And like I said, if you happen to know, you can leave it down below for me. I would really, really appreciate if you know anything about that, because that would be something that would be really, really helpful to me. Let's see, what else do I need to know? Like I said, since I did not use up all 100 grams of the yarn whenever I knit this, some of the things that I would change in the future is to knit the body and the band portion a little bit longer. Um, there's nothing wrong with how I knit it, and to pattern specifically, it turned out great. I think maybe I would just try to use up more of the yarn instead of having so much left over. And I think that's probably what I would do. And I know that my straps need to be knit shorter. I did, it suggests that you try it on as you're knitting and measure the straps. And I did that multiple times. And for some reason, I still knit them longer, I guess because you're supposed to measure them maybe unstretched, and then they got a little bit stretched or unstretched. I don't know. I don't know how exactly I ended up knitting them too longer, but it's also, like I said, superwash merino, so it could have just stretched out in the blocking process unintentionally. So that's something that I probably would knit shorter next time, is the straps. I would do it less than recommended in the pattern. But other than that, I absolutely loved this pattern. I 100%, like I said, would make it again. I love the variegated yarn in it. Like, it's so nice. It makes such a really pretty texture, because basically you start knitting it and then you turn it inside out, which is really, really cool. So you get that reverse stockinette with the slip stitches, and then the ribbing on the side is really nice. The ribbing on the bottom is really nice. The double knit, the finishes are fantastic in this pattern. You can tell how well thought out it was. It is just great all around. Highly recommend. Like I said, I would absolutely knit another one. So the next time I find a skein of hand dyed or anything like that, that I'm like, oh, I can pick this one skein up, that's definitely maybe will be my go-to pattern to do that with. I think that's about all I want to say about the Framework Bralette by Jessie Maed Designs. The next pattern I'm going to be making is another tank top. I know you're like, oh my gosh, please stop making tank tops. It's just so hot here. I really just only want tank tops right this second. So the next one I'm going to make is the Hope Top by Gudrun Fesl. And I'm going to make it in this really, really pretty, bright, kind of electric purple blue color called Now That We Don't Talk. And it was from the Eras Yarn Club by Sewrella. I did already make a gauge swatch for it, so that is done. I love it's in the cashmere sock base, so it's very, very soft. And it's going to be my first time knitting cables, so I'm super excited about that. Me and Jeremy did our very first podcast episode together, and so we talked about kind of our projects that we did in July, and all of his projects which were new and nobody had ever seen on the channel yet, because he started knitting after I did, and so he's really excited. He's working on a sweater right now. But I just really want to thank everybody for kind of sticking with me in the beginning phases of our channel. I know the lighting's always crazy, or there's animals squawking or meowing or barking or all of those kind of things. We're trying to get our microphone situation kind of fixed and set up, because I don't know whether I should clip it to my knitting. I feel like that's bad. Maybe that's why some people hold it. But in our podcast, it was a little kind of just disjointed because we were kind of passing the microphones around. And next time, I think they should be clipped. So hopefully we'll get better sound and that kind of thing. Hopefully I will get better over time at editing the videos. And so I really, really appreciate everybody coming back to the channel or coming for the first time. And it means a lot that you're interested, or hopefully that the videos are helpful to someone. And we can keep track of our knits from the very beginning. And so thank you so much again. And I will see you probably in the next Knit Notes video, if not podcast. And have a good one.